be a sponge, and then bring the juice.
By focusing on your improvement, by focusing on your progress, and eliminating any fixed mindset that you may have and acts of perfectionism, then you encourage your own mastery.
On some level, we do what we want to do 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes it may not seem like that, but if I'm choosing to work instead of sleep, what I'm actually saying is keeping my job is more important than sleeping.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of getting beat. What can I do to get over this hump? So mentally, that's when I kind of put that forefront, like, hey, it's either all or nothing.
I like to put failure in quotations because I don't believe that failure is true failure if you're looking at it with the right mindset.
The truth is, the journey to greatness is hard. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, and every day you have to decide what you value, what you want to pursue, and what you want to achieve. And if you dig deep enough, if you push hard enough, we all have what it takes to be great. Welcome to the Edge of Greatness.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I am joined by Brian Levenson. Brian is a mental performance coach, founder of StrongSkills.co, author of Shift Your Mind, and host of Intentional Performance Podcast. Brian, thank you so much for taking time to join me today. I'm excited to have you on.
Thanks, Charles. Really excited to be here. You're wearing a shirt that says "Be Great," so excited to talk about greatness with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I actually want to start today with something a little different. I've been reading through your book. I've been really enjoying it. And there's an exercise that you mentioned in there that I thought could be a fun way to start today's conversation off. It's the yes and improv. You down for something a little different here?
Sure.
All right. Since you're the guest, I'll let you start the story.
Yeah. Well, I think improv is an amazing tool for us to use. So to give a little background on the idea of yes and, I think what you want us to do is to go back and forth and to just tell a story and then share. All right, we'll go back and forth and with yes and. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, let's give that a shot and see how it goes.
All right. So I just want to make sure I know what you want from me. What do you want from me?
Go ahead and start the story, because isn't it how you would say a part of the story and then you'd stop and then I would say yes and then this happened? Or is that not how it goes? Did I misread that?
No, it is. But I mean, do you want me to start on any story? Do you want me to start
any story? Let's go crazy. Let's go wild.
All right. So last night I was having a hard time falling asleep.
Yes. And then I decided to read this book that I had lying on my shelf that I've been wanting to connect with for a while.
Yes. And I was highlighting the book and I noticed a typo.
Yes. And then it made me wonder how many times people put things out there in the world that aren't complete.
Yes. And I've done that as well. And it's frustrating when I notice that something isn't exactly the way that I wanted it.
Yes. And then I thought maybe I should give myself forgiveness and put my stuff out there in the world, even if it's not perfect.
Yes. And I love the power of grace.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Talk to me now, what you want to accomplish with an exercise like this.
I mean, I think we have these different shifts that we talk about in the book, and adaptability is a big piece to what I call the performance mind. And so the ability to adjust, the ability to go with the flow or adapt or be agile or be flexible is often forgot about when it comes to performance. We often train. I know you have a baseball background. We train, we go through everything, and then the game starts and sometimes we just try to perfect it. And that's when we can often run into some issues. So in the book, I talk about perfecting preparation and being adaptable in performance. And so improv is just a great tool to use to work on your adaptability muscle. Because the reality is we train for all these different conditions, but let's just use baseball as an example. Someone could get hurt. It could start raining. There could be wind. There are even different stadiums that have different dimensions, and we have to be able to adjust to those stadiums. So I just think a big part of performing is the ability to adapt, the ability to be agile. And so I love working with clients on improv. I'm not an improv expert, but that yes and concept is something that I find to be helpful beyond even just performance. I just think for great conversations, thinking that way instead of no or but is really profound.
No, I enjoyed doing it. That was the first time I've ever done that exercise. And I enjoyed being able to just kind of build off of the conversation and just kind of explore where my mind wanted to go. And that adaptability piece, I definitely see what you're saying when it comes to performance. You mentioned preparation and performance as the two separate minds. In your experience, where do you believe more people struggle, in the preparation part or in the performance part?
I think it depends when you say people who we're talking about. So if we talk about elite athletes, for example, a Division I athlete, let's just call that an elite athlete. I think for most of those people, they're forced to prepare. Sports creates conditions. There are coaches, there are practices. We have to spend some time in that preparation mind. So I think for most elite athletes, it's actually the performance mind that they tend to run into some trouble and some issues. And then the other thing is, I think we get so many reps in that preparation mind. We just constantly drill. Whereas live action, I'll just stay with baseball. I mean, how often are you actually hitting a 90 or 95 mile an hour pitch? It's hard to simulate that in many sports. How do we actually face live bullets? And when I've worked with baseball players in the past, it's a big question that we have to try to figure out, because you're not going to have pitchers throw live bullets at you all the time. They need to save their arm. And so I think for a lot of baseball players, they need to learn how to shift away from what they're doing with front toss or off the tee or whatever they're doing to try to get their swing to where they want it to be, to actually getting into that box and be into that performance mind.
That makes sense. I'm curious then, do you find that an athlete, let's say, that does like football where you play once a week versus basketball where you play a couple times a week versus baseball where you may only practice once or twice a week, would affect which mind you spend your time in more often?
I think so. I mean, I started the book with a story about a junior college baseball player. And so a lot of these ideas came about my work with those types of athletes. And it's interesting because in baseball, yes, you are performing a lot. And you also, as I said, are just in it all the time. I mean, it's just, they're longer seasons. Let's go to Major League Baseball. So you're constantly performing. So I do think, to your point, it depends as far as what level we're at, what sport we're at. But the other thing about baseball that's different than maybe a sport like football, or I'll use basketball or soccer or lacrosse or hockey. Yeah, okay, you're performing more, but how much action are you actually seeing over the course of a game? So maybe you get to bat 3 or 4 times. Maybe if you're playing in the field, you get 3 or 4 opportunities to make a play. But your execution is less than maybe a sport like basketball, for example. So I find it all to be interesting. I think at the end of the day, what's most important for people when they read the book and when they think about how they're going to shift their mind is to think about, hey, what am I and when do I need to be that way? And how am I approaching stepping in the batter's box or stepping on the basketball court or stepping into the pool when it's time to perform and execute? And how am I also stepping into those conditions when it's time to grow and learn and develop and try to get better and improve? I think we just don't talk about the need for both. And to me, if you want to fulfill your potential, you really need to spend time thinking about each of them.
No, absolutely. When I hear you talk about the variation between performance and preparation, I always go to my athletes who always talk about how they're either very good in practice or they're very good at studying, but then the test comes or the game comes and they freeze. In your experience, what is it that's in that moment causing them to have that setback or that moment of doubt? Maybe, I guess, I don't know how to explain it, but a lot of my kids suffer from that. They feel very confident prior to it, but when the moment comes, it's like the light turns on and they go, oh God, you see me. And it causes them anxiety and problems.
Yeah, there's a great book by Sion Beilock called Choke, which gets into what happens when we can't do the things that we've trained ourselves to do. And she talks a lot about over indexing on our mind, overloading our mind. There's also tension that can occur in the body. So how do we deal with anxiety? How do we deal with doubts? And what does it look like when we're in that space that might hamper our ability to execute the way we know how? For me, I have a background in sports psychology. We often are talking about pre-performance routines. We're often talking about self-talk when you're in the performance. breathing. So there's all kinds of tools that you can use to try to optimize your capacity to perform. If I were to go back a little bit and answer the question, to me, first of all, I think none of us are immune to it. Like, we're all capable of struggling when we're performing. So it's deeply human, because humans tend to really care about what other people think of them. We are designed that way. We're wired that way. In order to be part of a tribe, you have to care about what others think of you. So I don't think the purpose is to not care about what anyone thinks of us. And yet, when we're executing, when we're performing, that can get in the way. If we are thinking about, gosh, I wonder how my dad's going to think if I strike out, or the coach, or my girlfriend, or whoever it might be, that's probably not going to help us hit a ball. And so for me, I think it's really important to create a pre-performance routine. And then, as we said earlier, to have that adaptability, to have that performance mind that allows us, when we're struggling, to acknowledge it, to accept it, and perhaps then to shift our attention or our focus to something that is useful and helpful for us. So I love baseball players that have a cue that they can use. They have a breath that they can use. They can release their gloves. They can look at the foul pole. There's all kinds of things that you can do when you have that self-doubt. And then the last thing I'll say is, being worried or self-doubt or anxiety, it's all part of the human experience. Like, that is part of performance. And I love Beyonce, who says, I'm nervous when I'm not nervous. If I'm nervous, it means I'm going to have a great show. So what Sion Beilock would say is, it's really the interpretation of those nerves that determines the choke. It's the interpretation of, feeling the anxiousness in our belly. Is that going to cause us to choke, or is that normal? And so she talks a lot about getting the interpretation to be helpful for you, rather than just listening to what your body is telling you or what your mind is telling you as well.
Do you think the more we care about something, the more likely we are to experience those anxieties and those moments of fear going into a performance?
I do. I really do.
I think that's an interesting piece of it too, because you mentioned caring, and you mentioned that part right there causes you to then think of other things that you may be letting down, like your father, your mother, your girlfriend, your team, whatever it may be. And I'm wondering if that right there could be a big part of, when you go into a big test, you care because your grade's on the line. If there's a way to eliminate some of that to allow us to perform at a better level, is there something that you've worked with in the past where you have a person who cares so much about every performance that it's causing them to freeze in performance and not be able to be their loose, easygoing self that you see in preparation?
Yeah, we mentioned perfectionism earlier. I think most people that are elite at what they do have a level of perfection. When I work with pro athletes, they always will say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. And I understand what they're saying, because in order to get to a certain level, you have to perfect a swing or a shot or a stroke or whatever it might be. And so they have constantly repped and repped and repped. And they need to let go of that perfectionist mind when they step onto the stage or in the arena, so to speak. And so for a lot of those people, we talk about, no, that perfectionism isn't bad. I think we have this sort of societal belief now that, no, focus on progress, don't focus on perfection. I go, okay, that's fine. But if you want to be really, really good at something, you need to constantly be tweaking and figuring out how you can make it better in preparation. The issue becomes when we're in sport, which every sport has failure as part of the game. That's where we don't need to beat ourselves up and break ourselves down. And that's where we need to be maybe a little more compassionate, like we said when we started with the improv, toward ourselves and be our own best friend. And so I love the idea of like thinking like a pro, but playing like a kid. And so when I work with athletes, we often talk about, hey, what would I had a conversation with an athlete yesterday, a soccer player. And we said, what did you look like when you started playing soccer? And she said, well, I was about 4 years old. I go, yeah. Did you have confidence? She goes, yeah. I was like, yeah, you believed in yourself even before you really had the competence and knowledge for how to play the game. You just played with a fearlessness and a childlike attitude that we actually need to use now that you're a college athlete. And so I just think like those are big, big pieces of the puzzle. And I believe we need both. I believe we really need to get clear on how do we stay disciplined? How do we perfect our craft? And how do we let go of that and just play? Because we play sports, we don't work sports. And we need to constantly remember that.
I love the idea of playing sport, not working sport. I think that's very valuable. And I also found it interesting. So you mentioned society and how we perceive things based on certain words. And as I look through the chapters in your book, there's a lot of words that are frowned on by society. And I'm curious. So we have arrogant And arrogance, in my opinion, I think is super valuable, especially in performance. You talked about perfectionism just a moment ago. You talked about the future and present. So a lot of people say, don't look to the future, be present. And there's no need for you to look forward. And some of these different selfish, that's another one that people get, oh no, he's selfish. And it's not a bad thing. It's a tool. How much do you think society's impact on those words affect us from becoming our best self?
I think it's huge. And I'm glad you brought it up. Look, I spent a lot of time on those words, and I knew that putting a word like arrogant or selfish or even future, to your point, in the book was going to raise some eyebrows. And I wasn't doing it because I wanted to be provocative and sell more books. I was doing it because I felt like it was the truth. And when I went to a word like confident, I felt like it was shortchanging what I think you actually need when you're performing, which is an unshakable belief in yourself. That is not confidence. It's arrogance. It is, regardless of the evidence that you're seeing, when you are between the lines, you need to have this unshakable belief that you're going to find a way. I think the mistake when people read the book is that they focus in on arrogance and they lose track of humility, which is what I also talk about. So I think you earn the right to be arrogant if you've done the humble preparation. So if you're just arrogant all the time, it's not going to go very well. You're probably going to be a jackass. No one's going to want to be around you. That's no way to go through life or even a performance. And I think it's really, really key that you build with humble preparation. I think you need to think about the future in order to tap into the present. And the selfish one, I think, is so often overlooked. I think about parents. You're a parent, Charles. I'm a parent. We all know there are certain parents that just pour into their kids, and that's all they do. And they focus on kids, and they're selfless, and they're just giving all of themselves to their kids. And then maybe they're not healthy physically, or maybe their marriage isn't as healthy because they're just focused on the kids. And I don't have all the parenting stuff figured out. I'm still learning it as I go as well. But I think it's a really good example of you have to take care of yourself first, your marriage second, and the kids third. And what happens is we often reverse that order, and you end up pouring from an empty cup, and everybody suffers when you do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point there, is that we get lost thinking of others and we don't take care of what's important here, because if you're not at your best, you're not going to give your best. That's another piece of this, is that, you may be giving to your kids all the time, but like you said, if your marriage is unhealthy and you're unhealthy, there's a chance of divorce. There's a chance of you passing earlier than you're meant to. And then your kids are left without anybody. So I think there's some things that, without looking inward and being a little bit selfish at times to take care of your needs, so then you could be selfless, you miss a big part of the boat.
Yeah. And to go back, because you were really asking about society, I am a believer that too much of anything's a bad thing and nothing of something is also not ideal. And so we often try to make things black and white, good and bad. But to me, I believe in the power of polarity. And I think it's really important to know, well, when do I need to let's use anger, for example. Like we just watched Will Smith storm on the stage, smack somebody. I think most people would say that's probably not a good use of anger in that moment. But if I am witnessing a robbery, or I'm witnessing something that is potentially violent to other people, anger might be helpful in that term. Or anger internally might be important. Like he could have used that anger that he felt to really express how he was feeling when Chris Rock said that. And maybe there was another opportunity to express himself that way. So I think emotions, for example, aren't even good or bad, even though we say anger, sadness, frustration, bad emotions. Like we need those emotions in order to keep us alive and in order to keep us safe. We need those emotions to connect with people. And so I'm just a big believer that we need to know when to use them. We need to create an awareness around how we feel. We need to create an awareness around our thoughts. And we need to get really good at learning how to regulate and manage ourselves and figure out when something is useful for us and when it's detrimental. And to me, that's the game of life. That's, hey, is this helping me or hindering me right now? And only I can decide whether that emotion or that thought is helpful. So arrogance, selfishness, future thinking, I think the key is not to get rid of them. I think the key is to know when to bring them out.
How do you manage not letting your emotions dictate your performance?
Anger is a big one for me. And you talked about passion earlier. Like I'm I think like excitement and anger are like half brothers or half sisters. Like they often show up in a similar way. We get animated. I get louder, right? I get energized. So I've worked with athletes before say I'm better when I'm angry because they're energized, they're excited. There's an intensity to it. There's an activity to it. For me, one of the things I've learned about myself doing constantly work on myself is like anger is something that if I don't create awareness around it, it can absolutely, run my decision making and my behavior in a way that I tend to regret. It's something that if I don't have a relationship with it, there are usually times where I'm like, man, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I shouldn't have done that. And so I've learned that, over the years. I'm still a massive work in progress, but yeah, that's an emotion that I know for me can get in the way. And I'm passionate. I don't want to lose my passion. If I believe something needs to be stood up for, I stand up for it. And I have always prided myself on doing that. Like I was very small growing up, but if someone was bullying someone, I would step in, even though I was probably the last person that should step in, because I was upset. I was angry. I didn't like it. I stand up for people when I think others aren't treating them the right way. And it's sometimes I put myself in harm's way in that regard, but those are times where that anger or that frustration is actually healthy and helpful because I think it has to do with justice and doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm going to shift a little bit here because I think that there's something that I want to tap into with your performance, both as a speaker and a guest and then a podcast host, because there are a few people I listen to that I really enjoy listening to how they direct a conversation, but then also how they are a guest on a conversation. I think there's something very unique and valuable about that. And I want to know is how do you vary your preparation when you're a guest versus being a host?
It's very different. I'll talk about similarities. So for this podcast, I listened to your show. I listened to the episode with Dave Klein, who I recently spoke with and think he's really sharp and it's cool what he's building and what he's doing. And so I prepared, listened to podcasts, went on your website, saw, books that you're reading, saw what you're up to in the gym. And so I want to know who I'm talking to. And then it's the same way when I'm recording with somebody. Like I want to read their book. I want to listen to their podcast if they've been on podcasts. So I just think that preparation is key. I think one of the traps that I've learned as a host is the over preparation. It is one of the rare performances that I do where I actually do think as a podcast host, I've been over prepared at times. And what I mean by that is I will create a list of questions that I know I want to ask them. And if I am over prepared, so to speak, I sometimes will force myself to ask those questions rather than deeply listen and try to find a gem within what they're saying. So I think as a host, there is some risk if you are forcing the conversation, and it's not always what makes for great dialogue. As a guest, I need to bring the energy. I need to be interesting. I need to be able to share and be convicted. As a host, I think it's all about curiosity. And so I could sit here for the next, 20 minutes and just ask you a bunch of questions, but I don't think that's why you have me here. You're here to try to learn the things that I know. And so for me, it's about curiosity and conviction. So when I'm interviewing, I really like the number one thing I want to be is curious. And when I'm sharing and I'm speaking, I want to be convicted. I want to make sure people know that I've done my homework and that I believe in what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean I still can't be curious. Like there are times today where I may flip it on you and ask you a question, but I think when guests do that to me, I don't mind it. But if they keep going down that slope, like it's annoying. And so I think knowing when to be curious and when to be convicted in life is huge, but those are two big differences between being a host and being a guest.
Which do you prefer, curiosity or conviction?
One comes way more naturally to me. You want to guess which one?
Curiosity?
Nope.
Really?
No. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It's probably why I'm so obsessed with curiosity is that it does not come naturally to me. And I'm glad you said that because that means I've done a lot of work to try to do that because I value curiosity actually over conviction. I even have a little sticky note right here. They're not going to be able to see it on audio, but it says stay curious. Like I'm constantly reminding myself to tap into curiosity. And the reason for that is I think when you start with curiosity, you can learn about someone else, you can learn about a situation. And I actually think it makes your convictions more valuable. It makes them better. But I'm either natured or nurtured towards conviction. And I grew up in a house with 3 boys, 2 parents that really instilled confidence in the 3 of us. Like, we could speak our mind. It was not a yes, sir, no, ma'am house. It was speak your mind, speak your piece, stand up for what you believe in, do the right thing house, which I'm grateful for. The confidence, the conviction, plenty of arguments, plenty of disagreements. And as I get older and older, I just don't think you can learn without curiosity. And so the podcast for me is all about learning. And I think early on, I'm probably on like 270 episodes. I don't know how many there have been, but it's like year 6. And early on, there were times where I definitely would tap into my conviction more than my curiosity. And I did not think it was as enjoyable to listen to. And I didn't think it was actually as enjoyable for me as the podcast host. So yeah, I think that that's a big thing I'm constantly working on in my life, is to focus on curiosity. But naturally, I am wired to tell you what I believe in, why I believe in it, why I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right. When I'm with my brothers, when I'm with my friends, it can come out really quickly, really easily. And so it's a lot of work. I still work on it, but I'm obsessed with curiosity. I think it is the most underrated tool that we can have as human beings.
Yeah, no, I find it interesting that you're wired more towards conviction than curiosity, because when I listen to, and again, I guess it's because I'm listening to you as a host, I feel like you have an incredible ability to just peel back layers and consistently get more and more from your guests. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what is it that you're looking for or listening to or paying attention to that allows you that ability to constantly peel back just another layer and get a little deeper in a conversation?
I think active listening is huge. So what is active listening? It's being able to notice and observe someone, not just what they're saying, but their tone, their body language, how they're moving, like little glimpses. And I think there are always stories there, but we have to really be focused on the other person. And so what I am wired to is, you say something, then I have a thought, then you have a thought. I can go back and forth on that all day. And so for me, I have to turn the volume down sometimes on my thoughts. And so what I do is, I'll have a question. I know I have a question in my head, but I'll hold it and I'll let it just sit in the back of my head for a little bit until the other person finishes what they're about to say. And ideally, I don't even get to that question. Ideally, I ask a question based on what they said. And those tend to be the best questions. But I do have a question in the back of my mind, or I keep a pad, a paper, and a pen. So I'll write down like a theme that I'm, thinking about as they're talking. So I really think it's about that active listening. It's being engaged and then following your curiosity. Like, genuinely, the purpose of asking a question is to get information that you don't know. And so that's one of the other challenges when you have someone on that wrote a book, for example. I know what they talked about in the book. I'm actually not that interested in what they are used to sharing on every podcast, but there might be a thing that I read that I'm curious about that I want to go deeper into. So I'm always trying to just ask questions that I genuinely don't know the answer to. I know it sounds obvious, but we often ask questions that we already kind of have our convictions on. And I'm just not all that interested in that.
Yeah, I find that interesting, because I do agree that when I listen to other podcasts, it's often similar sets of questions about things every episode. Whatever the guest is, there's like a set, here's my order of operations. Now, there's obviously a few out there that are not like that, and they're very fun to listen to. And I think that makes a big difference. I guess what I want to go to next is, I'm curious about, is because you mentioned the reason for questions is to learn and to adapt and to grow and to learn from the person that's on. And one of the things that I'm interested in with you is, as a person who works for himself, like me, I work for myself. How do you balance knowing that you have all of these things you have to do and then being able to shut it off without having them done?
I'm not good at shutting it off, but I will shut it down. Okay. And so last night, at 11:30 at night, I went down onto my computer and took some notes. And I am not a 4-hour sleep, good to go type guy. I never have been. I don't think I ever will be. My brothers, my family would all say, Brian needs his sleep. My wife would say that as well. So I have a hard time shutting it off. And if anyone can teach me how, I'd love to know. But like I said, I'm passionate about my work. I'm passionate about studying this stuff, mindset, leadership, culture. It's kind of I don't think you ever master it. I don't think you ever have it all figured out. So there's an endless stream of opportunities to learn from those places, which is what I love about it. And yeah, there are times where I just want to go to bed at night. My wife, she hits the pillow. She's out. She works in our school system. Like, I don't think she is ruminating on things the same way that I am. And I'm jealous of that. But the flip side of that is I love thinking about this stuff. That's how I was able to write the book. That's how I'm able to have the podcast and my newsletter and all this stuff. Like, I'm constantly thinking about it. Shutting it down, though, I do shut it down. I try to. So I'm home for dinner, at around 6:00 every night. Weekends, I stop seeing clients. I don't see clients on the weekends. I don't see clients at night. So I create parameters there. I go on vacation. I carve out time to be away. I need to get better with the phone. I love social media. I know you love social media. Like, I can be on Twitter. Twitter is interesting. I love my kids, but the story that we're reading, is not as interesting as Twitter. It's just not. And so I have to get better at that. There are times where I just put the phone in another room, at the dinner table, try to put the phone away. Those are things I'm still working on. But yeah, I think shutting down is necessary. I think shutting off is a challenge for me. When I'm on vacation, we just went to Disney World. Everything at Disney World is an opportunity to learn about culture and leadership. I mean, it's just a remarkable place when it comes to service. So yeah, I'm not shutting it off, but I was not working while I was down there. So that was shutting down.
I think there's something different between actively working on something and then passively learning while you're still there and being present and things of that nature. I want to know, how have you gotten to the point to be able to tell people no?
Gotten better. And I have a thing where I think you have to earn the right to be able to say no to things. And so I've been working with people for probably 13 years, if I count my 2 years in grad school. So 11 years in private practice. I said yes to everything. And speaking here, work with this person. Yes. Any opportunity. Now I can say no. So I just turned down an opportunity to go to an event today. I turn clients down now, which is really hard to do when you're building and like, yeah, I'll work with you. Yeah. Now I have systems in place to turn down business. I turn down speaking gigs all the time. And so I have created boundaries. I also, one of the best piece of advice I got was from a CEO who said he carves out an hour a week for mentoring. And so I started carving out an hour a week. I got a request over the weekend for someone who wanted to pick my brain. I'm like, great, 5:00 Monday, whatever the date is. And so I just have that, blocked off. I think like podcasts and stuff like that. When I wrote my book, that's when I really started focusing on saying yes to those opportunities. Before the book, I wasn't all that interested in media, so to speak. But once you have a book, and for me, I want to try to get that book to reach as many places as possible. Like, I say yes to a lot of those opportunities just because of the book. Not necessarily because I love doing this, but I am passionate about what's in the book and sharing that message. So I've gotten better. I think it depends where you're at in your career as to whether or not you should say more yes to things and no to things. I think we've sort of glamorized and glorified this idea of saying no, but I don't regret saying yes to all those opportunities early, because I learned what I liked, what I didn't like, what was, financially helpful and what was not. So I think and it's nice to be wanted. It's nice to be valued. And I don't take that for granted. Like, someone wanted me to come on a podcast. How cool is that? That's amazing. So I think it's a fine line. And I'm constantly going back and forth between what I say yes to and what I say no to. And I also talk to my wife a bunch about it to make sure that I'm saying yes to the right things. And she helps. I have a coach. I talk to her about it all the time. So yeah, it's constantly making sure that you're saying yes to the right things and saying no to the right things as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge piece of it too, is I think I love the idea of earning the right to say no, because I think if you try to set boundaries early, you're going to shut yourself off from opportunities to develop and grow and become what you're trying to achieve. And if you do it too soon, it's just going to put you in a bad spot. I want to shift gears again here. I saw a tweet that was interesting, and I think it goes in line with growing as an independent business person. And it said, never give up is not sound advice. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Did I say that? That was one of my tweets.
You said it. Yeah.
Sounded like someone smart. So I was like, is that me? No, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I didn't give up my sales job. Like I graduated from college and worked in sales for 2.5, 3 years. And, I gave that up. I could have gone and worked in sales for the rest of my life. I gave it up to go to grad school and study sports psychology. As a really good example. I think if you're in an abusive relationship, give up. Like, I mean, it's not for me to say you should or shouldn't, but I think there's an argument to be made for giving up. If you hate your sport, like I had Mike Deegan on, I'm sure you've crossed paths with Mike. He's a brilliant guy. And he talked about, like, he has meetings with guys all the time and says, hey, do you still want to do this anymore? He coaches at Denison University, Division III baseball. Is this really what you want to do? And I think giving up is not bad. I don't think quitting is necessarily bad. I think too often we say, just keep going, just put your head down and keep going. And if you're in a bad relationship, or if you have a bad friendship, or if you have something that is not, making you better. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with giving up. And so I think this idea of don't give up is, I know where it's coming from, which is persevere, be gritty, be resilient. Yes. All of those things. And it's okay. Like, you can give up. And that you're not a worse person. It doesn't make you any less than, and maybe giving up there will allow you to do something that you don't want to give up. But I think intention is such a big deal. Like, well, are you intentionally not giving up? Like, or are you giving up and you're giving up for the wrong reasons? Like, those are the questions that I think are way more interesting than just a simple, 3-word phrase that gets repeated over and over again.
So I'm curious where you stand on finishing what you start then. If you're not done with something and you feel like it's the wrong path, do you say stop and just move on? Or do you say finish what you start and then move on?
I say get feedback.
Okay.
Like, get other people's perspectives. Hey, let's just use the Division III baseball player. Hey, Coach Deegan, what do you see? What do you think? Coach might say, yeah, I mean, like, I don't think you really enjoy the game. Or, hey, I think you got a lot more potential in you that you don't see in yourself, and we're going to help you reach that. Like, I think that feedback is really, really valuable. We have blind spots as human beings. We don't always see the whole picture. And so I just think surrounding yourself with people that genuinely care about you, finding them, nurturing those relationships is such a big deal. And then at the end of the day, it's your choice. And you may regret giving up, but that's also a learning experience. You may regret staying with it, also a learning experience. But at the end of the day, like, life is short. I struggle with people that are like, go toward the pain, go toward the hard stuff. Anything worth doing is hard. I've probably said that at some point. I'm sure I've tweeted that. Go into the Twitter archives. I don't agree with it. I think, like, we should enjoy life. It doesn't mean things aren't going to be hard. Like I said, I've had a podcast, 270 episodes. I have a newsletter for the last decade or so. Every single week I'm reading. Sometimes I don't feel like it. And sometimes you have to do things that are hard and that you don't feel like doing. Working out. Like, I don't like working out, but I worked out this morning, and you know what? I'm glad I did. So sometimes it is worth keeping going and finishing what you started, but other times it's appropriate to pivot or adjust or to change and go in a different direction. And so I'm very, very big on not having things one size fits all. And I'm very big on the power of polarity, and that there are powers and strengths in, and as we started this conversation with, rather than just thinking about or. So when I work with people, I often am helping them say, all right, well, let's look at the benefits and downsides of each, and how can we get the benefits without quitting, or how do we minimize the downsides if you do quit? And I think that's a big key to the process.
Yeah, I've heard you say before that you don't like quotes or sayings that have the term always, never, everything. You have a hard time like buying into that. Is that something along the lines of we have to be open and flexible to the adapting world around us and see things from a different perspective? Or why is that your viewpoint on those types of quotes and sayings?
Yeah, I think it's my viewpoint. I think you run into trouble if you are saying always or never. I think life is complicated and things come up, and I really struggle with that. And individuals, we're all different. And so what might be good for me might not be good for you. And it's hard to tell people that they should always do something or they should do something in general. And so that's where I go back to that curiosity piece, and not just curiosity for others, but curiosity for ourselves. Hey, like, when might this be beneficial for me? When might this be harmful for me? And if I have clarity around that, I still may say I'm all in, let's go. But at least I've done the work. At least I've thought about it with a little more nuance. I think nuance is a big deal. For someone that loves Twitter, I love nuance. Twitter doesn't always give us nuance, but that's the beauty of it. Like, I think we all have multiple sides to ourselves. I love long form podcasts and I love short tweets. And I think most humans are like that. I think you might love a long documentary and then love a YouTube 5-minute interesting clip. And I think too often we say, oh, I just love long form, or I don't like this. It's like, well, it depends. I'm sure if you have a documentary that's really interesting to you, you'll probably sit there for 3 hours and be interested in it. But if you watch a movie that has no interest in you, you're probably not interested at all. So I'm just big on trying to get to nuance. And there is a time for an easy quote. There is a time I got stay curious on a sticker, but I don't need to be curious all the time. I've used curiosity the wrong way. It doesn't always go well. And so even with stay curious, I use that for when I'm interviewing people. But for our conversation, as I said, I'm not necessarily trying to stay curious when I'm chatting with you. I'm trying to share what I think and what I think I know.
You mentioned that you've used curious in the wrong way. How so?
I was in a car once. We were in Uber, and in the back seat, I was with somebody who I just met. And we had a friend in the front seat. And in the back seat, I was just trying to find out who this person was. So I was just grilling him over and over, trying to find out. And the guy in the front seat is like, he's not on a podcast. Just let him breathe for a second. And he was right. Like, that was not appropriate in that time. That time called for small talk and looking out the window and, just being a little bit. And that was annoying. And so, it probably went from curious to nosy, and that's not necessarily what we were there for. And so I think for me, it's big to know when it's useful and when it's not. And there is a time for small talk. There is a time to just be chilling. There is a time to just enjoy a beer with a friend and, just hang out and watch a game. Like, you don't have to be deep all the time. Like, I love weddings. I love dancing. I love just like letting go and get on the dance floor. I always say you can find me at a dance floor and a deep conversation. Like, those are two places I love to be. And this, I'll just end with this. That is me. Like, I'm both. I will let my hair down, have a couple drinks, and get on that dance floor. People be like, whoa, what? I didn't see that coming. And then I'll be having the most deep conversation with someone, and they'll share all of their intimate secrets with me. That's also me. So authenticity, it's flexible. It's not rigid. We are not one way. And I think we often try to say that, oh, I'm this or I'm that, and even going back to the book, I'm humble or I'm selfless or I'm this. I'm like, oh, are you all the time? And does that serve you all the time? And so I think we just need more, and we need more polarity. We need to continue to think about when something is serving us and when it's hindering us.
I love that. So as we wind down, I got one more question for you, and then I'm going to kind of let you get back to the rest of your day, because I know you got a lot of things going on here. But one of the things I'm curious is, with all the things that you're required to do and all the things that you have to do, how do you go about bringing joy to your performances?
It's in my mission. So for me, my mission is to help others see the possibility of their potential and enjoy success. And so enjoy is right in there. I am in this industry because I enjoy it. I love talking to you. I love talking to my clients. I enjoy reading about all of the areas of psychology. And so joy for me is absolutely part of it. Are there parts of the job I don't enjoy? Hell yeah. Putting taxes in and, invoicing and, scheduling and all this other stuff I don't enjoy, but it's the price for admission. And I don't think any of us enjoy every element of life. And I think that's part of the deal. Like sometimes you have to put your head down and do some things that aren't sexy or you don't enjoy, or maybe you can outsource those things. I outsource some stuff. So for example, my podcast, I have somebody who writes the show notes and creates clips for social media. I don't want to do that stuff. And he's happy to. And so he does a great job. Shout out to Joey. And I'm grateful that I have Joey. And so, yeah, I think you have to figure out when there are things that you can have other people do for you. You also have to figure out what people are better than you at. Like Joey is better at writing show notes than me. So, oh yeah, like let's have him do it. And then I'm fortunate that I don't work in a factory. I don't work in a blue collar job. And I get to talk to people for a living. I'm very grateful for that and privileged to be able to do that for a living, and people pay me money to have a conversation with me. I mean, that's, to me, it's an amazing gift. And I work with a lot of people who are not in that situation. So I know how hard it is to work at something and earn a paycheck when you don't always enjoy it. And I understand why people have to do that sometimes. And I'm not judging them for that either. I think that we all are on our own journey, on our own path, and have to figure out what works. But for me, yeah, I enjoy most of my work, and in turn, I enjoy most of my days because I spend a lot of time working.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I greatly appreciate it. This was a fantastic conversation. What I want to leave with is an opportunity for you to connect with my listeners. Where can they find your book? Where can they find what you're doing next? Get your newsletter, things of that nature.
Yeah, so strongskills.co, which you mentioned in the beginning, we don't have the M. The M was way too expensive. It was ridiculous. So you can go to strongskills.co and you'll see what we're up to there. And you can subscribe to the newsletter there and check out the book, all that stuff. And then social media, Twitter and LinkedIn are the two places I like to play, at Brian Levenson. The podcast is called Intentional Performers. Yeah, I'm pretty active. I'm pretty open, available. I know Charles got a copy of my book through a contest that we did. I think that was the first time we connected. So I appreciate your support on Twitter, especially. And I love what you're doing, and hopefully people will go out and be great. I love following greatness. Like I hope, one of the things I'm very flexible in how I talk, but make no mistake, like I love winning. I love being great. Like I love pursuing something. And I love even doing things that are challenging. I get energy from doing things that other people say, oh, that's going to be really difficult to do. I'm good with that. So I think all of us should be striving to be great at whatever it is we want to be, whether that's as a mom or a dad or, in our work or in our, personal lives or friendships or health. Like, I'm not great at all of those, but I think the goal is to try to strive for it. So I'm definitely into ripping and running and striving and trying to be awesome.
No, I greatly appreciate that. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Charles.
As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars. Fall flat on your face, but remember, whenever we fall, always get up.
Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.